Okay. Then John, take it away.
Well, I know what I think. I want to hear what other people thought. So what do we call that meeting? It was the Affordable Housing Alliance or something with Kiki Miller and is it Maggie Lyons and some of the others. I know there were like 4 of us there, including David. And so I was curious as to what other people heard, and I will start. What I heard from Bob Seal, the administrator at Post Falls, and some other administrators was one way to make a home more affordable is to reduce regulations or maybe relax some of the fees that are normally required. Yeah. And to me, that just points out what I want to point out, and that is that every time we take a step, every time we add a regulation, we add cost. And there, in a prior iteration of this board, I made note of a National Home Builders Association survey, so it's biased to that degree, I suppose. But their, not survey, their study showed that back then, the median home price was like 300 and, I don't know, something 949 or 59 or 69, whatever. But
was that cost or was that?
I think it's a sales price. I think that was a sales price. And I guess a couple of years old now, so the prices were different.
Oh, yeah.
But the point they made, I think the number I recall was that $95,000 of that was due to regulations and fees.
And that was a national survey.
National, right.
And it varies, but even around here, it's between 2 and 20% of the cost of the home is attributable to permanence.
Between 2 and 20%?
And
yeah, the county tends to be lower, for instance. The cities tend to be higher. That's typical.
No, it's just the 2 and 20% is widespread. So,
Yeah.
Is that development fees or does that include like,
that includes
building inspection and
yes.
meeting
That's all
building
fees.
codes and
all fees?
Yeah, okay.
Depending on your survey or your community.
Yeah.
Within our area is between 2 and 20%. Nationally, of course, it varies dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
San Francisco is very different from a Dallas, and so on and so forth.
And whenever a study comes out, you have to look at who's doing the study.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by whatever bias there is, because I would think that the National Association of Home Builders would probably not only consider fees, the hard dollars that are being paid to somebody, but the cost of regulations and probably even the cost and the time it takes to accommodate inspections and that kind of thing. So I imagine it's biased to that degree, but that's a pretty healthy percentage.
It's a chunk of change.
And I get a little bit frustrated by people like us who establish rules and regulations and they carry the weight of law, right? That drive up the cost of housing. And then we have people like Kiki and Maggie trying to do something to resolve the high cost of housing. So, I mean, on the one hand, we're raising the cost. On the other hand, we're wringing our hands wondering why people can't afford houses. And they can't afford it for a lot of reasons. I mean, wages got to keep up to a degree greater than what.
Wages haven't since the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a multifaceted, difficult problem.
It gets complex. It gets complex. Yeah. But that's what I wrestle with as a planner and zoner. Not so much a zoner, I guess. I'm more of a planner. To whatever degree whatever role we play in continually rising costs of housing, I think it's illustrated now. When people like Bob Seal is one I remember because he was sitting diagonal to me. But I think every administrator would acknowledge. In fact, Shelley Enderud, the city administrator of Post Falls, said the same thing. Yeah. Every time a regulation goes into effect, the cost goes up. So that was the point I wanted to make, and I wanted to hear if anybody else had similar opinions or options, other ideas for affordable housing. On the other hand, another issue, I think, David, you mentioned tiny homes. They're becoming more
Palatable?
They're often suggested as a means of affordable homes, and yet if somebody wants to go put in 5 acres of tiny homes, you can bet your bottom dollar the neighborhood's gonna object to tiny homes in their neighborhood. So this is the kind of tug of war that goes on all the time. We know there's a need, and yet it's complex.
Yeah, well,
Complex issue.
yeah, I think that with
ahead.
the tiny home objection, I think it's aesthetics. It's not that people will really object to the tiny homes. They are worried about the traffic and what kind of people are coming in and how they're going to affect their landscape, you know. And if you could actually have what, unfortunately, well-regulated communities, you know, in that aspect, then you could probably get a better buy-in. But that's part of the problem for us in Idaho. We shun regulation, and therefore we get the consequence of it, which is not necessarily appealing or appeasing to, you know, to the eye. And so I think that's the battle that we actually fight on a regular basis. We want people to have the opportunity to provide for themselves or family or, you know, the people that they enjoy spending time with. But then we have allowed so much inward movement of people that are displacing our residents. And I think that's where I actually have more of an issue. We have displacement of our residents. And I don't hear people talking about that. I hear them talk about, we don't have enough homes, we don't have enough this, we don't have enough that, so therefore we need to grow more. And I'm just going, well, we really need to start talking about displacement. But us, for planning, I don't think we can actually get into that. But it's something I think that it's not part of our discussion. It should be part of our discussion.
I think it's legit to have the discussion.
Yeah, so.
Of course, I've been a regulator and a developer for the government for, you know, almost 60 years, and I'll give you a little bit of insight. The subdivision that I live in out there now was developed by a developer years ago, you know, 90s, and basically did a half-assed job of putting in the drinking water system. And then he sold it to the homeowners out there. And I spent the first 10 years of living out there bringing it up to some kind of a standard that would meet, you know, DEQ requirements and, you know, potable water and all that kind of stuff, because he wasn't watched or whatever, or he didn't spend a whole lot of money. Now, some of it they did all right, but it took a long time to bring it up to some kind of a standard. So there's that side of the issue. But I'm dealing with another side of the issue now, this lead copper rule that they've got for drinking water systems. And it's all based upon the stuff that happened in Flint, you know, where they changed the chemicals they were putting in the water that came out of the river, and it caused the lead to precipitate off of the old lines that run into the houses, and the kids were drinking lead. Well, they've got the same, EPA and DEQ have the same regulations for systems that have lead supply pipes like that as they do for my system. It's all poly. There's not 1 inch of lead or copper piping in the whole system, and they're making me comply with all of these new lead copper regulations, inventories, and all. So there you can have examples of, you know, on both sides of the issue. I think what maybe with our group here we need to do is to make sure that whatever we're doing isn't some unnecessary thing, but also that we're protecting not only human health, but, you know, the environment. And of course, being an old transportation engineer, I've got lots of examples where someone's built a subdivision with substandard roads in it, and then it really causes and that's those developmental costs. Those folks are going to pass them on, you know, to the person that's going to buy a house or build a house or whatever. But you know, there's a lot of private roads out on the Rastrum Prairie, the ones with the blue signs instead of the green ones, you know, and some of those roads are pretty good shape. Other ones, the school bus drivers won't even drive down them, and they dump the kids off on the county road and make them walk down there. But
Oh, gee.
well.
Through the snow and everything.
Still both ways.
Well, yeah, right. But I mean, if it's if you're going to treat everybody the same, I mean, you know, so, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Our kids
But
need,
anyway, so
our
I
kids
think,
need
I think
more
we need to be very
exercise.
sensitive of what we do, but,
Well,
you know, I've had places where there was no electrical code, and my God,
Oh,
you know, the federal government agencies were doing, they had, in the wintertime, the guy that packed the mules into the wilderness area was told to be the electrician for that particular government unit. Well, then I had to come in behind and rewire all the buildings because they were all, you know, there was dangerous issues. And so, you know, when I got to Washington DC, I wrote the electrical policy documents for the Department of Agriculture to put a stop to it, because we were spending millions of dollars rewiring all of these federal facilities that have been wired by a horsebacker.
Wow.
So I mean, you know, there's got to be a balance to
I
it.
I don't mean to derail our meeting agenda. But I'm glad to hear you say we shouldn't be doing anything that's unnecessary. And I think we'll see that kind of thing come up. The things that, why are they necessary, or are they necessary? And the other thing that I think it came to mind as Sherry was talking, and that is, I don't know if you said something or if it just popped into my head, density. You know, we do things to minimize density, and this minimizing density that creates a higher price. When you reduce the supply, then the price goes up. And one last note on that, it doesn't pertain to Kootenai, except that it's right next door. You know, Spokane has gone, they've actually changed their zoning because of the housing crisis. And so what do you call it, single family unit neighborhoods now, a developer or anybody can come in and put in multifamily right next door. And so you bought your house knowing that it was zoned for single family, and now their city council or county board, I'm not sure which one pertains.
It's a city in that case.
What was
It's a
it?
city in that case. The council, the county hadn't gone there.
So
The
they said, well, we were just kidding about that single family home thing. If somebody wants to build a duplex or threeplex, I think it goes up to sixplex, they can do that. So.
And that's true all across the nation. Major cities have been rolling back their zoning code to try and make it more flexible.
Yeah.
So that it's
Well, that's
possible.
great, except we hear this argument all the time about people like down in the reservation. Well, I bought a 10-acre parcel or 5, knowing that I could build that it'd always be 5 acres, and they don't want a smaller or 10, whatever. But when we make a restriction, eventually somebody's going to want to undo the restriction. It's just it is complex, and it's frustrating to me. But,
One thing I'd also add, and it's like a minister swearing in church, but what we need to, this group and the county officials too, every time we work on something like this and we look to the licensed professional folks for advice and things like that, I recommend we just don't take their advice at face value. I think we need to take a look at some of that stuff too, because, you know, there's a tendency to over-engineer things if you're not careful, especially in the private sector. In the government sector, we used to have to design dams for public safety to 1 times 10 to the -6. That means 1 chance in a million that there'd be a failure. And when I changed that to 1 times 10 to the -5th, 100,000, the cost of all of those structures dropped by almost 200%, because that extra safety factor. And I used to talk to the Boeing engineer and say, well, what's your safety factor for your airplanes? Well, it used to be 2 times. Well, now it's about 1.2 because they're trying to be competitive with European aircraft manufacturers. So you got to be real careful with how far you go with safety factors and things of that nature. And they have been going down. I'm a little afraid they might go too far and we'll end up with a bunch of catastrophes and kill a bunch of people. But I mean, the point is that we need to take a look at what the professional engineers and geologists and stuff recommend for us as well.
I agree. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I guess our main job today is to look at the issues that are pending and have been pending for a number of years now for some of them, and come up with a good list of how we want to tackle these, what order we want to tackle them in. We can do this by, we can look at them and say, well, what do we think is the most important? Or we can look at them and say, what are the things we can think we can knock off really fast because the major work has been done, and we can do that and then tackle and fill in some of the blanks on the more difficult ones so as we're going. Or we can do some other way of doing it that you guys can recommend. So how do you want to tackle it?
Well,
Madam Chair, I would just add in to what you said, that some of these things we've talked about so long ago, I'd like to hear from you if you think they're still relevant.
well, the short-term rentals is still relevant.
That's the kind of thing I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
It's been years since we brought that up.
Yeah,
We
well, I
came
would
up
just,
with ideas.
yeah.
We even worked up plans
Right.
for agri-tainment and what are some of the others, home-based businesses and so
Right.
on. And that was particularly during COVID that we did that, because so many people were moving here doing home-based businesses. That one's almost done. If we still think it's relevant, we could almost take it immediately.
Yeah, I think that one is the easiest one to do, the home-based business. You should do that first. That's my opinion as an
No, I
outgoing
agree.
person.
I think let's move forward with the things that we can, knock off the list, and then they're done, and then we
Finally
can
off the
focus.
plate, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, being new, I'm curious about the process and what happened that these just kind of
I can answer that.
stalled.
I can answer that. We have limited abilities to process these things. We've been relying on our legal counsel to work up everything that we do in the ordinance format before we bring it to you for a first hearing and then the court. That's a little different from other places I've worked, where the staff has often just worked up the draft, and then once we got agreement from the Plan Commission, then we'd hand it off to the legal counsel and say, put it in the final format.
You know, that's been my experience. I mean, I had 9 attorneys working for me in the federal government, plus the Justice Department. But if I didn't sit down and write the rule or the regulation or something, or even the settlement agreement with some big company first, it took forever to get it done. But once I wrote something, then there was some meat in front of these attorneys to chew on, and we got stuff moving a lot faster that way. I don't know if you can do that.
So
Yeah, can we do that? I mean,
Yeah.
Why
Yes.
are
Well-
we doing it? I mean, is there
Actually, some of them
rhyme
are
or
done,
reason?
except for just Pat checking them over to say, is this legal?
Well, it's not even so much that, it's just, I mean, it's really formatting
Right.
there's no legal question about
It's the
the
legalese.
home rule
Yeah.
issue,
Yeah.
excuse me, the home occupation,
Yeah.
those kinds of things. That's actually a board decision. It just needs to be put in front of them. So, yes, I think we can work up some staff.
The question I was gonna ask you, Dave, is do you have staff that can write some of this stuff
Yes.
for the legal people to chew on, then, I guess? If you've got, yeah, I mean, pat him on the back, yeah. Well, you know, see, that's.
Actually, there's a couple of planners under Ben
Yeah.
that've done some drafts
Okay,
already.
all right.
And I think it's fine to go ahead along those lines, and if you're comfortable with the concept, then we'll just put it in front of Pat and say, we need you to put this in final format. And
Yeah.
I think we can move things along that way.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, the old system wasn't working.
Well, there's that, and in fairness to Pat, we've had a lot of major overhauls in the last couple of years, like, recall we took on PhD's 5-acre rule and the critical materials. Those were major things that took a lot of time. Not least of which because there was emergency ordinance first and then a final ordinance second and so on and so forth. And there's been another half dozen things like that that the board told Pat they wanted him to do.
Yeah.
And so, in the end, you got to remember, Pat is legal counsel for 2 other departments, not just land use. So he's got limits to what he can accomplish. So that's why, if you're okay with it, we'll just start drafting up our version of what we think works, and then ask Pat to put it in the final format before we go to the public hearing.
You know, I kind of like to have the staff from the organization do the drafting of some of these again, because you get the thought process of the people that have to deal with it on a daily basis in your document that way, rather than some kind of sanitized
Very
legal
good
thing.
point, yes.
You see what I'm saying? I always like my technical staff to help me write the stuff first, and then I throw it out in front of the attorneys, you know, and let them do it. Yeah, I mean, and I don't expect the staff is gonna come up with something that's so grossly off base that it embarrasses everybody or anything
I
like
don't
that.
think
So,
it'll come
yeah,
out
so
with
no, I think that's a good approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Totally.
Aye.
Are you okay with, I'd like to couple with what you just said about the couple that are already ready to go. I'd like to throw in one last shot at the serial minor subdivision
Yeah,
issue and get that over.
that one's
Which
important.
one was it?
Serial minor subdivision.
Oh, yeah.
I'd just like to get that out of the way.
That's one of the more important ones. We
Yeah,
just
but I
haven't
think-
gotten as far with it.
But I think the paperwork on these 2 things, the BRBOs or short-term rentals or whatever you want to call them, as well as the home-based business, those should be able to be a
Neighborhood
slam dunk.
Neighborhood meetings were, it's almost like we're past the point, but those were, you know, that was written for all this development that's coming in, to have the public have a right to say something ahead of time. And since we haven't gotten to that, it's probably less important, but it's more important to get it done. We're past a lot of it, but it's still important.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd frame it a little differently. It was important then, it's important now, because we're still among the fastest growing counties in the nation.
Right.
Darn it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I just think that's one of the more important ones.
So what's the reason for that?
For us being the fastest growing.
Look
How
around.
much time do you want to spend on this?
What's that?
How much time do you want to spend on that? I can think of at least 5 things.
Yeah,
Well,
let's not digress.
I was gonna say mine was kind of rhetorical.
Let's stick to the schedule.
Contact me after the meeting.
Yeah.
So I do have, Terry had raised a question about HOA and their
Oh, yeah,
edicts or,
and I just went through
rules.
these drafts, and then I went through my HOA covenants. My HOA covenants are pretty tough. I
well,
couldn't believe
but,
it.
so the question is, which supersedes?
Well, what I was thinking that we should do in the language would be that if you want local rule, which is, a lot of people want that, well, the very lowest local rule is an HOA, you know. So what we need to do, we just need to recognize in what we draft that this is the base for the county or whatever you want to call it. But we recognize the fact that HOAs may have other requirements in their covenants that the county doesn't trump. That's all. You don't have to say what it is. You don't have to make the county responsible for enforcing the HOA. That's up to the HOA.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you gotta be careful. But you need to recognize it, because I'm gonna tell you right now, in my HOA, if all of a sudden there was a county rule that said that people could have 15 old wrecked cars in the back behind their house,
Yeah.
my people would go ape, you know. We've got a couple that we're trying to enforce it, make them clean it up, you know,
Yeah, my HOA, you can't have a home business of any kind.
of any kind,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. See, now in mine, if I get 100% of them to vote, okay, but I can never even get a quorum at my meetings, let alone 100% vote, so, you know. But, you know, and we, you know, if somebody wants to raise llamas or have some horses, but we've got people out there with the bigger lots that have got 20 head of cattle on them, and you know, they're not all pets. So
No.
they're they're selling them for meat.
So David, what do we do?
Yeah.
For,
The HOA versus, how does that, versus the county?
well, remember, the county's a base point,
Yeah,
starting point. HOAs can always do more.
Okay.
But you have to
All
say
right, so
that in
that's-
the county.
that's already,
Okay.
that's already,
Well, no, that's a given of law.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, but I
That's-
think you still, because the given of law, the
HOAs can always go further than the county or the
Okay,
state.
so we're good.
But you got to remember that the HOA is responsible for enforcing their own regs.
Yes.
And we are not.
Right.
No, but
Yeah,
I
no,
would
no
like
to-
issue
we
with
should-
that.
and we
You
shouldn't
know, I
be.
would like to
No.
have whatever the county comes up with, just recognize the fact, just say that in there. Rather than say, oh, well, you know, it's a point of law that the HOAs can have more than, when you're the person trying to enforce that HOA rule, and you say, well, it's a point of law, and the first thing a person will say, where the hell is that in the law? You know, I wanna see that. You go find the law for me or
Well,
something.
that's what attorneys are for.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean,
If you want, we can put
the HOA doesn't wanna have to hire an attorney
we
to
can
make
do
somebody
parenthetical statements that
clean
say,
up a wrecking
this is
yard.
the county standard, consult your HOA for any additional standards.
That's perfect.
Just put it in the
Yeah, that's perfect,
regulations, yeah, something,
We can
Yeah.
do that.
just a
No.
heads up like that, so that the poor person out there on the ground, but what, you know, that's trying to enforce something, you know, can say, well, here it is, and we have the authority to go further, you know.
Yes.
You know, so that they don't fall back on the county and say, well, this is a county rule and your rule doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so that's settled. So now what do we do
So,
So,
For-
and then, so
to move these
Oh,
forward?
oh, oh.
what, this cottage industry, this land use codes, what's our thought on this one? Kootenai County Land Use Code.
Well, do we need to like make a motion and vote on these other ones, or have we given you the authority to do your thing and then give it to Pat?
You have, I think.
I think that's what
I
we're
think we have consensus.
Okay,
Or let me just make sure I heard you right.
okay.
We're doing serial minors, home occupations, and VRBOs.
Yep.
That much is a given.
Yep.
We'll work up the draft, we'll get it in front of Pat. Do we all agree on that?
Yes.
neighborhood
As
meetings.
far as the
We'll add
small,
neighborhood
Neighborhood
meetings to
meetings.
that?
Dave, as far as the small subdivisions are concerned, that's one of the places where I think you guys need to be careful about coming up with a road standard that's so high that, you know, the person could never afford.
Well, you
it.
kind of dealt with that already,
Subdivided.
right?
Yeah, we eased off of the road standards, so that now it's just fire districts.
Yeah, so we're not generating a whole
Highway
bunch,
district standards.
yeah, a whole bunch of work for
The middle
engineers and stuff, yeah.
Right.
But we also are getting a road built that you can get a fire truck down.
Right.
So,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
What's the width again on the fire district standard road? Is that 20 feet or is 14?
Yeah, so if it's anything more than I think 200 feet, it needs to be 20, there at least needs to be pullouts of 20 feet in width.
You see, it's not,
But it's 14-foot width with the
14 foot
pullout?
It's
wide.
14 feet
But if-
wide.
And
Uh-huh.
if you go 800 feet?
I think it's 200.
200.
you know,
Every
the
200
the
feet.
template of the road is
Pull
one
out.
thing, but you
Okay.
gotta have a road made out of the right stuff so you don't get stuck.
But we're
right
not
on.
doing that.
Well,
No, we said we're doing fire
Fire
district standards, which is no,
It doesn't have a subgrade.
that's right.
Yeah, but you're not gonna talk about the structural integrity of the road at all.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
We're mixing issues for a moment.
Yeah.
If you're okay with it, and just so we can get it out of the way, I would like to get the serial minors out of the way.
Yes.
Because that's a process issue and not directly related to roads.
Okay.
I think we need to circle back around. We still have the broader issue of what do we do for roads in the county, in the unincorporated county? Because if we're solely reliant upon fire district standards, that has no actual structural integrity.
Yeah, there's no structural integrity
Yeah.
for the roads.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
there's
that's not-
width,
yeah.
you know, but there's no,
Yeah.
you can make it out of mush.
Yeah. Yep, I think the serial miners should be finished up
Okay.
Yeah, we
So-
beat that horse
to death.
So we've got four things: home-based business, neighborhood meetings, short-term rentals, serial minor subdivision.
Right.
Those are the ones we're gonna push to the top.
And that's No.
That's, okay.
Trying to keep us busy for a minute.
But I'm not sure I understand everything I know about this process, because I think what you just suggested, and maybe we okayed by nodding of the heads, I think you suggested that the staff and the legal will come up with a draft that is then presented at the public hearing. Is that how?
Well,
is
presented
that-
to us.
Presented to us
Presented
before a
to us.
public.
To you. The difference I would clarify is staff will work up the concept and try to put it pretty much in the final ordinance format, but we'll rely on our legal counsel to make sure it meets final ordinance format.
So are we going to see it before it goes to legal counsel?
Would you like to?
I think that would probably be better,
Okay, I'm fine with
because
that.
of that,
We
you
can
know.
We're just trying to take some of the pressure off of
Yeah,
that.
that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm
and
fine
that
with
way,
Move things
I'm
forward.
fine with that. I thought
Yeah.
I heard that it would go to public hearing, and that would be our point of deliberations, you might say.
I understand why you thought that, but that wasn't the intent.
No. I think the main takeaway for today is the staff that works with me will take on the major burden of drafting and get it to a point where it's 9/10 done. Pat just has to look it over and make sure that we got things in the right order.
Yeah.
That should save him a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think that's important.
And David, the individual that kind of does the majority of the drafting, would they be able to be here so that if we ask
Oh, yeah.
questions as to why they drafted
Absolutely.
that would kind of
That's a
help
good
us
suggestion. Yes,
to get-
absolutely.
Right.
Because we
And
want to make it
gives
as,
them
a-
ownership too.
Yeah.
They'll feel better
Yeah.
Yeah,
about having been part of it.
yeah, yeah.
and then that way, because we'll understand the intent better when the writer's with us.
Yeah,
Agreed.
excellent idea.
Thank you,
How
thank you.
about my comment about the number of units in a subdivision? Now, this is kind of set up for, a residential subdivision in a community or something where you're gonna build a whole lot of houses on quarter-acre lots or something, but
Which one are you referring to?
well, the developmental neighborhood meeting process guide, yeah, that, if we're dealing with 5-acre parcels in the county, 50 of them is 250-acre development, that's big, that's more than a quarter of the section,
Oh, here it is.
So not short-term rental.
so.
Well, all I can tell you, it's been long enough, I've gotten the details, but Wes Hansen was behind a lot of that. And his thinking back then was prior, was on planning commission for over a decade. But his thinking was that there's a threshold for density that should trigger the need for the review by the neighborhood, not for the lot area coverage. So density was what was behind that. If you think otherwise, I'd be.
Well, I just think that in the city where you got a quarter of an acre lot, 50 lots isn't that big of a piece of ground. But out in the county where you got 5-acre lots, 50 acres is
It can be, but remember, we have, everything around the lakes is as small as 8,250 square feet.
Yeah.
Lots. 8,000, not 5 acres.
I don't know how you're gonna deal with it then, but I mean,
What's a density issue?
Yeah, it is.
It's just density.
well, yeah, but it's a density issue, but how are you gonna deal with it in writing where you say you're gonna have, you gotta have 50 lots before you consider the process?
Well, we could sidestep the lots and talk about density.
Okay,
That's-
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, it just, you might have, it might be okay if you got, 8,000 square foot lots in the subdivision, 50 of them is only, what?
Well, one approach could be ignore lot size and talk about dwelling.
Talk
Yeah,
about
Maybe.
dwelling units.
Yeah,
You
well,
have
there,
50
now,
dwelling
then you
units,
could say it, yeah, because.
Then that's the threshold.
Yeah, but it'd have to be, for me, it'd have to be less than 50 if the dwelling units, if it's gonna be 5-acre lots. Because you got, that's a large, 250
Yeah.
acres.
Sure.
Uh,
What do you think's a better number?
Well, I said 25, but I actually think 10.
Yeah, I knew that was gonna happen. You wanna keep going down. Maybe 2 is the right number,
yeah.
Oh,
Because, well, that's what you're after, is to keep whittling down, whittling down, whittling down, whittling down. And the idea is to make a meeting mandatory, right? I mean, they can always have a voluntary meeting.
And that's
I would
what this
hope they
says.
would, actually.
Yeah, it does say for 49 or fewer units, it's recommended. If it's 50 units or more, it's required. So I like that. I think the language is good. I think that we're now just basically quibbling over what's the cutoff. And I think that we have to keep in mind the areas that's going to have, going to be impacted is those areas around the lakes, because that's where density
high
can,
density is.
that's where the high density is. And those areas that are more rural, you know, and I live in a kind of a more rural area, those meetings aren't, and we don't have anything. And the other thing is, we can always change it. So if we start off with these numbers and we don't like how it's turned out, we can actually go back and change the numbers. But I think making it less onerous is
Yes.
going to be easier to get it passed, which is, I think, our goal right now. Because our goal is we've been sitting on this stuff for years and we're not getting anywhere. So let's get it out from underneath us, and we can
Terry?
always go back and
Yeah, has this
change.
proposal ever been presented to anybody to vote on it?
No.
No.
That's the
Yeah,
problem.
see.
It's been years.
It's been,
Well, yeah,
this
but
was
it's never,
22.
we don't know how the politics is for this. We have no idea, because it's never been run against the politicians who take a look at it and vote
The
on it.
whole idea of
That's what
this
public hearings are
was-
for.
The whole idea of this concept of neighborhood meetings was to get an early picture of what the neighborhood wanted, needed, look at the developer's plan and say, gee, our objection is that the entryway to your development is here, and wouldn't it be better to come over here? It was to see if there were things that the public wanted and needed to allow the development to go without coming to the very last minute where it came before the,
Oh, yeah.
and
no.
then everybody comes in
Right.
loaded for bear.
Yeah, the
And that
intent
was
was
the
to
intent.
actually have a collegial discussion up front, so as to eliminate some of the heartburn in a public hearing.
And
So that everybody
originally,
was under pressure.
this number of 50, why was that, not that I have issue with it, just the history, why was that number chosen? There must have been a reason for it, or was it picked out of a hat?
Well,
I
it
think
was
it was-
in meetings like this, where the
Okay.
then plan commission
All right, so
argued it,
there
and
was-
finally
there
came to a
was
decision
thought,
that 50 was
and-
the number at that moment.
Yeah.
You were here at that time. Do you
I
remember?
think it's a little bit of picking it out of the hat. I mean, you gotta come up with a number somewhere, somehow, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, like Sherry was saying, we could start with this and see, see how it goes, and
The only thing
if it
about
needs
this
to be
is that
changed.
there'll be nothing like this that takes place on any subdivision on the Rathrum Prairie. That's basically what you're saying. Because
why are you saying that?
I'm not
Because you
following
got a
you.
5 acre lot, you got 50 of them. How many subdivisions do we have out there that are 250 acres?
How many 50 lot subdivisions do we have?
Yeah.
I think it's
I don't know,
4
yeah.
11
I
years.
don't know.
Yeah, we're hoping that they don't happen, personally.
I've got 25 properties and it's 160 acres, it's a quarter section. Some of them are 10s and some of them are 5s.
I mean, we're gonna have to workshop each one of these one more time, once you
Once
guys
we
come
have
up with
An actual ordinance.
action, right. So
And-
if we think a different number will work, think about it.
Yeah.
We'll have another meeting.
Right.
Yeah, the other thing too, I would like to possibly suggest is that whoever gets the assignment, if they think, well, yeah, if you allow them to have some leeway to make, in
Sure.
parentheses, a suggestion that was not
And then we can
part.
explain the rationale.
Yeah, and that way, if they
Right.
say, well, 50's too little or 50's too big, and I want to have an
Good
opportunity.
friend, staff recommends this.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that would just
What if
be,
you
Because
tried
you've
to-
got-
What if you
gonna
tried
have
to
3 more
approach it,
years
this
of
this is the last thing
experience
I'll have to
since
say.
this
What if
was
you tried to
wait,
approach
wait.
it from the standpoint of the total acreage of the development? That way you could, I mean, if you had a development in where they were only having 10,000 square foot lots, and you said, however many acres, I don't know. And then you said, well, if it's gonna be over a quarter section of land, which is 160 acres, then, it doesn't make a difference how many houses you're gonna put on it, that you're gonna have some kind of a process. If you used acreage rather than a number of lots or something, then you could, then the ones around the lake where you got 50 of them on a 10,000 square feet lot, you could control it that way because you'd have acreage, you know, how many acres you're developing, and do it that way rather than by the number of properties.
Well,
It's being subdivided into.
I think we're missing the boat there, though, with that, Terry, because this is, as Madeline tried to impress upon us, this is to get discussions between developers and people in the community. So this is talking about developments. You're talking about individual homeowners in an area.
No.
That's what I'm taking it as. You're talking
No, I'm
about.
talking about developments, but the development might be 20 acres with 100 houses on it, or it might be 10,000 acres with 100 houses on it. Depends upon the size of the lots you're talking about, see?
Yeah.
And you get out on
But
an
that's-
area like the
that
Rafton
fits.
Prairie where, I mean, we've got the 5-acre rule and all that, so you're looking at, there really won't be any requirement to have any kind of developers working with the community until you get to 250-acre developments.
Well, that's a discussion for serial miners right there.
That's what, sorry.
The serial miners kind of fit some of your concerns there on that one. The serial miner subdivisions?
No, we have a 5-acre rule, so.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody has 20 acres and they can only, out on the Rafton Prairie, they can only divide it into 4 properties, so none of this would be required.
Right.
Yep.
And that's a problem?
No, I'm not saying it's a problem. What I'm saying is if you develop a 250-acre development with all of the roads and all of the water and sewer requirements and everything, my God, you're gonna tear up a tremendously large piece of ground. And the neighbors, you know, may want to be involved in that process.
Wouldn't they
The
be?
size
I mean,
of the
yeah,
thing
when-
is huge.
So is your point, Terry, that there ought maybe be multiple,
tests, multiple tests for it?
yes, so maybe we have one overall number for total units, but also, I'm making this up, but to your point, maybe
Acreage.
if it's a quarter acre.
Well, no, not the lots, but the total development size.
I'm
Yeah.
misspoke. I mean, if it's a quarter of a square mile of development, is what I was trying to get at.
Well, that's 160 acres.
If it's that much land, that has the same kind of impact.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe we could come up with multiple
Right.
triggers. Are you
Right.
okay
Yeah,
with
I
that?
don't,
Yeah,
That's
I'm
perfect.
concerned about the size of the acreage.
Yeah.
we get it.
By
We get
using a number of lots,
So we'll think about
all right,
acreage.
yeah, acreage.
The total impact and come back with an idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you got those notes, Ben?
Got 'em.
Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Crystal clear.
Sorry, it took me a while to get my head around it.
Yeah, because I understand the original intent, but I also, I understand that, you know, a large area that's being developed but doesn't have 50 homes on it won't trigger this. But the large area has a big impact on the people living
Right.
in that area.
Well, it's gonna trigger the transportation system more than anything. You're gonna build 4 or 5 miles of road to access that many homes in 250 acres.
Yeah.
All we're talking about is triggering a
We just want
mandatory meeting or
neighborhood
a
meetings.
voluntary meeting.
Yeah, we just want to get people together.
You know, I haven't talked about voluntary or mandatory.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
That's what this is about.
Yeah, this is about voluntary or mandatory meetings.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Woo-hoo! Movement.
Okay.
I think we're all constipated,
Did we
the way
miss
this is
anything?
going.
You know,
Well, you know, the highway districts, guys, if you
That's on
develop 250 acres, you're gonna have to build a whole bunch of county roads in there. You are.
Well, highway district.
Yeah, I mean, so the
We don't
highway
actually
district.
have county roads.
Yeah, I mean, they're all county roads, whether it's highway district or not.
But those-
Now,
those-
to be clear, none, there are no county roads.
Right.
They're all highway district roads or private roads.
Yep.
And that's been the case since 1973, y'all.
But they all get Percy, so.
Okay.
All right.
So are there
Have we
any-
covered all the,
Are there any others that, on this list that are up in that category of almost ready?
can I see the list?
is plenty. based upon how long these have been sitting
Takes it
around, I
right.
think if you can get through this stack here, you've made, in a year, you've made tremendous progress.
I just had one question over this. Has there been a real big problem in the county with people renting their places out for summer, for summer home or for where it could really be bad in a tight community, like Coeur d'Alene, but I mean, I've got 2 properties that are 10-acre properties out there, and the guys from California bought them, and they rent them out for recreation property like this almost all year.
Yep.
And now they've gone belly up, so they're trying to sell them. Because people aren't coming up here in the wintertime, I don't know, I guess they thought they could get people to come here.
During our great time?
Rent a property out on Rafter Prairie to go skiing and Lookout Pass or something.
So is your question one of how much of a problem is Airbnb?
Yeah, has it been brought up much? I mean,
Not a lot.
I didn't think so.
It's been literally a dozen people that have been frustrated for a couple of years.
Oh,
And
We go nowhere.
Yeah, generally, I'm assuming it isn't a tight neighborhood where houses are like the Fort Grounds maybe, or those kinds of neighborhoods. And we're talking county anyway, so there aren't a lot of those in the county, are there?
well, there's surprisingly large numbers of Airbnbs in the county.
Oh, but I mean neighborhoods that are tight, where the noise is an issue,
Oh,
and
yeah,
the
to your,
parking is
no,
an
to
issue.
your point, I can only think of 3 neighborhoods in the last 11 years that have gotten mad enough to show up in front of the county commission and say, you ought to do something.
Yeah.
I think the city had a big deal. Yeah.
The cities get a lot more of it than the counties.
well, the big problem I've got with the ones in my subdivision are over the 4th of July holidays, shooting bottle rockets up, and the people out there are scared to death someone's gonna start a big wildfire and burn the whole prairie off, and those people don't give a rip about starting a fire and burning everybody's house down. So
But our
that's
sheriff
been the
doesn't-
big issue out there.
But our sheriff doesn't care about that either, so, hey, I live in an area that's relatively developed, and it's a tinderbox around 4th of July, and people are shooting off fireworks and bottle rockets and all that kind of stuff, and you can call the sheriff, and they don't come out, so you can, it ain't gonna.
They're not all renters though, are they?
Yeah, no, they're locals and they're renters and, and they all go to the Indian reservation and buy their fireworks and, so. That is something that we live with here in North Idaho, isn't it?
I
Yeah.
think maybe why we don't have the density like the cities do. It is pretty dense around the waterfront areas.
Yes.
And I think that's where your typical VRBOs, Airbnbs are most lucrative. And so I think with people that are not using this as an Airbnb and their next door neighbor is using it as an Airbnb, they're there using it for their enjoyment, but then every weekend or every week there's a party going on. And I think that's what we hear a lot of is saying, well, there's no code to address those kinds of things, and it affects our enjoyment of our property.
So that's the rational
That's why
basis.
we need just some basic, baseline.
Yeah,
The
I
cities
think I
have-
understand that, and I think that what we should be looking at is the impact, and that would be an impact, noise and that kind of thing, but to just lay down regulations for the sake of regulations is what irritates me a lot.
Yeah.
We should be looking at the impact, and a lot, that goes into the home-based businesses too, we wanna talk about only, 50% of the floor space can be attributable to the home business. Well, what difference does that make? Didn't I read that? I'm digressing now, but those kinds of things are what bother me. In the home-based business, I think somewhere it says an outbuilding is fine as long as it's clean and presentable.
There's a simple explanation if you want to hear it, but keep going.
Yeah, sure.
The rationale behind having a certain percentage of a home-based business as part of the residential unit is that it ought to be accessory.
Okay.
The home-based, and so to create some known point of accessory, that's the 50% part.
What's the purpose of regulating the home-based business? What's the purpose? And maybe it says
To,
there.
to prevent
Because
an
it's a residential.
over-intensive neighbor.
Okay,
You should not want a commercial development right next to you.
right. And so as long as it's not intense, to me, will someone like you walk into the house and measure off the recognizable 50% of the floor space?
It's been, yes, we've been doing it for decades, and it's frankly been a common approach to home-based businesses all across the United States since the
We're not across
1950s.
the United States, we're in Canada.
I know,
And
but
that's
it's
what's
it's
onerous.
typical.
And to me,
of
that's
those.
what's onerous.
But it's
Is
typical.
somebody coming in,
Do
okay.
you only do
Well,
that
what I would
if
say is,
there's
though,
a
that we don't-
complaint or?
Hang on a second, one at a time.
Sorry, I was just saying that we don't go into somebody's house or anything to measure out things.
But we could.
We usually ask for like a site plan,
Right.
saying, where are you conducting this business? What does it look like? And so,
And to my knowledge, we've never actually had an issue with it.
I mean,
Which is
there's
kind of
been,
my point.
The
Which is
home-based
kind of my
businesses, we just check to see that you've met these minimum standards. If you do, we're done, and then we rely on complaints. But there are some cases where you want to have a minimum standard for that one person that goes over the line and creates a nightmare.
So here we go with zoning, planning and zoning that treats everybody as though they're a criminal.
No,
And that's kind
No,
of what you're talking about.
it's
with
the reverse,
It's the
John.
reverse,
It
yeah.
creates a minimum standard in case there's an issue.
Yeah, because somebody might do it.
Yeah, but that's not unusual. Like I said before, that's been standard land use planning practice in this country, from my experience, since the 70s.
I actually don't trust people as much as you do.
Well,
So,
so let's get away from the trust thing.
yeah.
What impact is there on the neighborhood if somebody's using 60% of their space in their house for the home business?
I can give you a classic example, childcare. I have lived next, in the city of Dallas, I lived next to a childcare facility.
Okay.
It drove me nuts.
Why?
Because they had 120 children, literally,
What
in the
drove you?
home right behind me.
And what drove you nuts?
The 120 children.
In what way?
They were raising hell every day,
So it's a
yelling and
noise
screaming.
issue.
Yelling and screaming,
So
playing,
what's a
having
noise
fun.
issue? So 6 kids could have made enough
Oh.
noise to upset you.
No, because 6 kids is about a typical family size.
I think also too, what we're considering is traffic impact associated with trips coming in, trips coming out.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
That's
so-
impact.
Yeah, and so I think one of the things that we have been trying to do is incorporate more of a trips standard
Right.
in the home-based businesses, because we don't have a good standard for that. We have an employee count in cottage industries and even home occupations,
Right.
but still there's not a well-defined standard for trips.
Right.
I think that's an easier metric to track, to say that, okay, what kind of trips should be allowed for a business within a neighborhood that's meant to be residential in nature, and so what is a reasonable level of impact? So that is something I think we need to address.
And all of that can be on the table every time we bring one of these in front of you.
Yeah, another way to look at it is you're actually opening up more availability for people to have a business in their home as opposed to no business at all. It's a residential neighborhood, it's zoned for residency, and yet you're allowing someone to have a little cottage industry available there. So you could look at it the opposite way.
And that's exactly
That's
how the
exactly.
cottage industry came about, because that's been on the books only for about the last 5 years. Before that, you couldn't do a cottage industry.
Yeah, which is the difference, the significant difference between me and just about everybody else in the room is, why should someone have to come to us to get permission to take care of kids in their house?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily the kids' issue. It could be anything, right?
I'm using the example we're on.
Sure.
Sure.
You know, I think, again, one of the questions that we need to answer or ask is, you know, what is a reasonable amount of commercial use in a
In a
residential zone?
residential area.
Based on impact.
Yeah. And so there has to be
There has to be
thresholds
some
of something. And so I think that's just what we need to do. What is reasonable? What we think is the right decision. But there's gonna be something.
I think that we kind of almost agree, if we're gonna have this kind of thing. But, so then the next thing that comes to mind is the number of kids that you can care for. Well, that's what, now you might say that 18 kids are gonna be too noisy for you, but if they're not noisy, then who cares? You know?
Well, the threshold for that is actually state law.
Right.
Because there's childcare facility requirements, and I think it's 8 kids or more automatically triggers the state.
Yeah.
I'll just
Yeah.
give you an example. I have one property, 10 years, 5-acre lot. And I couldn't understand why 50-foot semis kept going by my house to go down to this guy's property. I mean, big ones. Well, what I found out, when he quit paying his water bill and I went down and shut his water off, he had a big building out back, and I thought it was just a warehouse for his home and everything. He was etching whiskey shot glasses with hydrofluoric acid, customizing and making custom whiskey glasses at his residential property. And they'd ship in the blank glasses, and then, they'd ship, and he was etching them with hydrofluoric acid, because that's what'll cut glass, Yeah, yeah. And when you come up close to the place, you could smell the acid.
Wow.
So we had, but it's crazy. I mean, why would a guy do that on his residential property? But that's what he did. I mean,
It's cheaper.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah.
cheaper.
But that is one of the things that we worked on, working into this regulation, was what size trucks and how much
Yeah, we did talk
traffic
about
can go down a residential road to someone's business. And you set the standard somewhere.
Yeah.
And somebody's not gonna like it because they think their rights are being.
Yeah, well, their enjoyment of their property is being infringed upon. Yeah, I wouldn't
That's
like
just
semis coming in my neighborhood either,
Right.
so,
Yeah, it was crazy.
yeah, so,
And FedEx trucks, in UPS, and one after another, what in the hell's going on down there?
well, it affects road maintenance and
Yeah.
parking and
A
access
lot of these are
and,
private roads.
Yeah.
And don't have road maintenance
Yeah.
agreements or associations, and so they're like, well, this person's tearing up a road, they're meeting the threshold traffic requirements, but there's nobody to enforce, hey, you're causing additional wear and tear on a road, but you're not paying for it.
Yeah.
I think that's a real good issue for any of the subdivision type things we're working on, is we really need to get people, and I don't care how big if it's 20 acres or 200 acres or whatever, we need to figure out a way to get people to have some kind of a road maintenance agreement with the people that are occupying those lots, because without that, they're just nothing. I mean, there's nobody will blade the road, nobody will plow the snow on the road. I mean, it's just,
If there's, I mean, with new subdivision where there is shared infrastructure, like a common driveway, then we have that.
yeah.
But if there are improvements outside of the subdivision, like a private road leading to a subdivision.
Yeah, that's a real
we
problem.
don't-
for
yeah,
you.
we don't have the
I know.
ability to-
Yeah, but you got a few parcels clear back here, and you can deal with a parcel, but then you got a mile of
Yeah.
dingbat road getting to it that nobody maintains.
It meets
No-
IFC standards, but.
Yeah, but there's no, it meets the fire standard, but there's no agreement to maintain the road at all.
Right.
Yeah, that's a real problem.
It's
Well-
the downside of building in the county. It's the downside of building in the county.
Do we, will we have, and sort of a looking forward, list of things that we wanna tackle after the first of the year?
This is it.
There's a list that Natalie just gave.
Yeah, somebody sent this to me. I don't know which, I don't know.
Besides these.
Sherry, what should we tackle after the first of the year? You're not gonna be here.
I can give you a big list, but I won't be here, so I won't infringe upon your time.
So I'm trying to have a understanding of how we
What's next?
operate and, move forward and, or do we just, as things come up,
Well, there'll always be stuff that comes up
Right.
Yeah,
that we have to deal with. But I think keeping this list in front of us, if we tackle these first 4 that we talked
Right.
about, then as we get to the end of those first, halfway through, let's set
Be
another
thinking
couple
about
and
the next round.
keep going
All right.
till we take care of these
Yeah.
things.
and
We
don't,
have more that we could add to the
yeah,
list.
and,
Thanks.
yeah,
But I imagine the list is always gonna be kind of shifting no
Shifting,
matter
right.
what the higher priority is. So, I imagine it'll grow, and alter a little bit as we
And
discuss.
don't forget, you have the comprehensive plan that you're supposed to be working on too. And that actually is rather time intensive. So,
Yeah, that's a biggie for us.
I'm waiting for the consultant to give me round 2, so I know
Right.
what
yeah,
the cost will be.
yeah. So that's actually a really big.
The one thing, guys, that I appreciate is you're making an effort to make some decisions and get some things done. That's, because I'm not one for spinning my wheels and not getting things done. So,
I understand, I appreciate your time.
well, it isn't my time, it's just, I get frustrated.
Yeah, sure. Well, you should.
One last thing, I always wrote the final rule when I was a Fed because I didn't want to have to go back and work it over again. And then if it failed in Congress, then it failed. But I always wrote the final rule that I wanted, not an interim one.
So when could we start reviewing these in the workshop and get them scheduled for? I mean, is December gonna be enough for you guys to work on these, or do you want?
I
More time.
don't know that December is gonna be enough time.
Okay.
I'm certain December's not enough time.
Okay,
I'm
so
thinking
how do you want to schedule it? How do you want to do them
Well,
one
I'd like
at a
the luxury
time?
of talking with the staff that's actually
Okay.
gonna do the work,
Okay,
and then get back with you.
That's fair.
I'm thinking, because this is something over and above what they normally do.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I'm thinking 2 or 3 months, we ought to be able to have a first round of stuff you can look at. But again, because it's already pretty well fleshed out.
right. Those, we chose ones that have
Right.
been worked over before, so.
Right.
So what is anything coming down the road that is not on this list that the planning commission is gonna need to deal with in the next month? I mean, next
Oh.
January. What's our projected meeting need?
Right.
No, I mean, nothing comes to mind that's like
Right.
needing to be done now. So I think more just working on our draft codes and
Okay.
getting those before you guys for some workshops.
You know, I had a question for the county. Say that you got the town here and there's a bunch of county, out in the county out here. What process does the county have if, say, Wiswap Gulch wants to incorporate 5,000 acres of of land in the county into the city?
What process do we have?
I mean, can the cities just, like in the old days where one rancher stole land from the other one, whatever, I don't know how it works, is there, I just was curious about
Okay,
that.
there's 2 answers to that.
Okay,
Right now, the area of city impact agreements we have in the cities limit city growth to some degree,
okay.
because they can only annex up to their ACI boundaries.
Okay,
But you'll recall, we've got to change all of that within the next year.
yeah,
Have new AIs, the state legislature purposely took out the city impact part. They're now called area of impact agreements, not area of city impact.
oh, okay,
Because the state legislature wanted to make it clear that the county's regulations are gonna apply. But the reason I bring that up, that new law requires a 2-mile limit from the existing corporate limits as the maximum limit.
2 miles, huh?
2 miles is the maximum they can have, but it's also supposed to include an area that's reasonably going to annex over the next umpty years.
yeah,
And I don't remember the details of it.
okay.
The legislation.
So like 2 miles per year or 2
No,
miles?
no, 2 miles total.
Forever?
Well, no, for the period of that AI. Area of
Okay.
impact.
Yeah, it totally depends on the city and what they're likely to expect for annexation. I think it's a 5-year
And
period.
it's highly variable, because Post Falls grow like a weed, whereas
Yeah.
Hauser's not, for instance.
And every time they annex, the 2-mile line moves out too, right?
It doesn't necessarily, they have to come back and actually amend the agreement to change the boundaries.
So what the state law says is that if this is a city, then the 2 miles is that distance. And that's set in stone with the new agreement, that what's inside applies. If they want to go beyond that, they have to amend the agreement. And remember, the agreement is an agreement between the county and the city. So that means the city council has to agree, the county commissioners have to agree. But the other answer to your question is, cities do whatever they want within the boundaries of an AI. The county's not involved at all. They send us a referral, but we have nothing to say. Because as long as it meets their planning metrics, we can't say no.
And I'm not against rural, I'm concerned about completely covering the prairie with cities, and is there gonna be enough water?
And that's legit.
Boy,
I was actually hoping to use the comp plan as our tool to bring that issue up to dialogue with the city. Because where I'm used to in Colorado, I spent 23 years there, you know better than most, every drop of water in Colorado's been adjudicated. Yes. And every city's already thought about it long ago. And you can see that coming here to some extent, but maybe in a different way. Because we have lots of water in Grafton Prairie, but it's not unlimited.
And it's shared.
And it's shared. And there's the big picture question to me of, do you really want rooftop to rooftop all across the prairie? And right now, we're set up for the cities to do that.
that's the basic question.
But I have workplaces where we got intergovernmental agreements between the county and the city that said, here's the Maginot line. Literally. You will not annex beyond that line. That means the cities are going up and not out.
Yeah.
But it's a big issue, and so far, none of the cities have said they're willing to have that conversation.
Well, going up doesn't necessarily reduce water consumption.
Well, it doesn't at all, but it does reduce impacts to roads and other things.
Can I segue just a little bit on that regard? How's the water evaluation on the reservation doing since they put the moratorium on? Not a moratorium, but whatever we
10 acre.
Yeah, that. Has there been any progress on the water volume or quality
I
testing?
haven't heard a thing.
Well, we've had 4 droughts in 9 years. So I think that expecting to see some sort of big change right now is probably too soon. So we have to give it time.
Well, no, I thought that they got, 3 years, or what did they, this change from 5 acre to 10 acre minimum, whatever we call that thing, there's a
There's
sunset.
an automatic sunset.
That started, they were talking about 3 years, so the clock is ticking. I mean, if they're gonna do some
Yeah.
studies, they should be doing some studies.
Well, I'm sure the study's probably going to take the whole 3 years because you're not going to see a big change right off the bat, especially, and it's also going to depend upon what the precipitation is for the area, whether or not we're having another drought season or stuff like that, so.
Yeah, a lot of variables.
Yeah, so 3 years is, in my opinion, too short, but it is what it is.
That was the county commissioner's decision.
Yeah, I understand. We make our recommendations and they do whatever they want.
We are,
Welcome to my life.
that's right. We do serve at their whim, right?
Yes.
Every once in a while, I think, Terry, you're almost 80 years old, and you shouldn't give a damn about what happens in the next 10 years, because you ain't gonna be to hell with the rest of the people. There's some people think of,
I'm not going to Mars, so.
Yeah, I mean, you sometimes think it's, people like you, Dave, that have this stuff, it's a tough thing, and when do you just give up and say, I'm just gonna spend the rest of my years and the heck with the future? Because it's, the house, rooftop to rooftop on the Rafter Prairie, guys, is, I'm worried about the natural resources, the water and stuff like that.
And the overall feel of the community. I have friends that have grown up here who tell me they're ready to move because they don't like the feel now of it it's rooftop to rooftop.
Yeah, oh, it's changed so much.
Yeah, so there's that to be thinking about.
Yeah.
If I may, I'd like to just ask you to think about something that's been troubling me for years, and I don't have a good solution for it, but I'd welcome any thoughts you might have. When I was a young man, the entire building code was about this thick. That was the Uniform National Code, you remember?
Yeah, I remember
Or the Southern Building Code, depending on where you were.
where you were.
Right.
That was a uniform electrical code too.
Yeah.
There was two.
But the whole thing was like
Yeah,
this. If I was to take you into my building inspection division right now and show you all the codes that we enforce that don't even include plumbing and electrical,
Yeah, that's
it's
state.
like this.
Yeah.
And it's because, over the years, it's gotten more and more complex, presumably for safety. And when I look at it, I see things like the building code actually requires our inspectors to look for the number of nails in sheetrock and the spacing in it,
Yeah.
and the dimpling of it, and how you actually connect the headers and footers and so on with the nail pattern. And it goes on and on and on. And I get that there's safety behind this, but when you go from this to this in 40 years, it's mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling to me that we've created this whole sense of, I've got inspectors that have to have 6 to 7 certs. The chief billing certification. Chief billing official has 28 of them in order to do their job. And I keep wondering, is all of this really necessary? Because when I lived in Colorado and Texas, the state legislatures there let each municipality shuffle that stuff around and pick out what really was necessary for their community. So the city of Dallas code might look like this, whereas another city might look like this. But you see where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
In Idaho, we don't have a choice. The state legislature adopts the code. It looks like this. That's
Uniform building code.
That's what we adopt, the ICC, International Council of Codes.
Yeah, right. And then you got the state level.
Yes.
State.
And state plumbing.
Yeah, and the state does the plumbing and the electrical here, county does the rest of the building.
So how would you tackle that?
Well, one way would be to see if we could get support on a municipal level to actually go to the state legislature and lobby them to loosen up the state law. So far, that's never gone anywhere because the legislature is convinced that
More is better.
that it ought to be uniform across the state
Yeah.
for the sake of the economy.
But the danger of going to the legislature, like the one we got now, frankly, is that they get rid of all the code. There wouldn't be any code of any kind, no
Maybe.
regulation of any kind.
They sure do like to write a lot of laws, so I don't know about that.
Well, you know,
They're very paper intensive, they like to make legislation.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is it's confounding to me that over a lifetime, things have gotten so complex that it's hard to find ways to streamline things.
well, they've tried to make life risk-free.
Exactly.
They tried to make, I was on the National Electrical Code Committee for a while.
Oh, God, you know it better than me.
I know it. And because I ran the electrical engineering program for the Forest Service nationally, so, but that's what it is. I mean, that's where did you come up with all the GFIs and all that kind of stuff? It's because we've tried to make society risk-free, you know, that, like I said, if the airplane designers made their airplanes so there would never be any chance of one crashing, first of all, it'd be so heavy you couldn't get it off the ground, and secondly, you couldn't afford to build the thing. So there's always has to be some type of tempering of that, but
Well, it's gone beyond the health and safety too. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about something I was unaware of, and I think I agree with you 100% on this issue, but they're talking about inspecting the dimpling on the
Sheetrock.
drywall and the
That's
sheetrock.
actually in the code.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing safety related about dimpling,
Well,
as far as I
You could
know.
just take a hammer.
presumably there is, or it wouldn't be in there, but I don't know.
No, but I guess I would think that's not true. That's part of the problem, I think, is that it's not all. I would guess we'd find a lot of stuff in there that's not health and safety related. I mean, I'm thinking that dimpling in sheetrock is an aesthetic issue, not a safety issue.
Yeah, it's an issue so that the taper can do a good job, or, or.
Yeah, and at some point, the contractor or the subcontractor's got to take some responsibility too.
There presumably is, or it wouldn't be in there, but I'm sorry, I don't know if the code's well enough to answer your question.
Yeah,
But
okay.
you see the big picture. If you would just sort of be thinking about that, and let's have this conversation when you feel it's right. I'm open to suggestions of how we might do things differently. Because I'm always trying to find ways to streamline and reduce and get things
It
out
would
the
take a
door.
tremendous amount of work to nitpick the uniform codes to pick out what you wanted to have implemented.
It would.
Oh, yeah, it'd take a lot of work.
Yeah.
But, you know.
But when we actually just did it, because next Thursday it goes in front of the Board of County Commissioners to adopt our version of the state code.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So, she built it.
Did you reduce the code to any?
Well, we changed a few things.
Okay.
Again, the state law binds our hands
Yeah.
to a very real degree. But what I was trying to explain to you is we've still gone through the entire code, made our Kootenai County additions to the extent that the state law allows. And we do that every 2 years.
Well, that's just like MUTCA, manual and uniform traffic control devices
Uh-huh.
that the road districts and the state highway department, everybody. So you gotta have the same kind of paint striping on a county road as you gotta have on
Right.
a federal highway, interstate.
Well, David, you have my support.
Yeah.
I'm willing to tackle whatever, however we can help that, because it is ridiculous.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
So, David, you will let us know when you've got something
Yes,
to bring
Yes.
before us.
I will.
Okay. In the meantime, I will poll everybody to see your availability for whenever David gets in touch with us.
Okay, that'll work. All right, well, thanks for your time.
So
Thanks for being here.
we are adjourned.
Merry Christmas.